Well guys, it is draft day, and as you guys have requested, here is my 2016 first round NFL mock draft. I almost didn't do a mock draft this year. My mocks are normally not very good, very few picks right. I'm nowhere near being a scout unless I'm playing Madden, but you guys request it, and it's fun to talk football and help get some time out the way before the draft actually begins. So, I have created my mock draft this year as I have usually done so on NFL.com's Predict the Pick. And there is a group link down below in the description, and if you want to join there with your mock draft, it will rank everybody's mock draft according to how many picks they have right. Their scoring system is their scoring system is kind of how I base my mock draft first and foremost. So you get points for getting the correct pick in the right spot. It's not about picking the player to the team, it's about picking the player to the spot. You get points if you are dead on, hit that pick, 1 away, 2 away, or as long as you pick a player that went in the first round, you get just a different number of points. So I've tried to tailor my mock draft this year to try and get me as many points as possible, and we'll see how I do. Normally I don't do very well in here because I'm pretty hard-headed with my top 10 a lot of times. I don't just want to switch to what everybody's doing at the last second. So we'll see how I do this year, guys. Here is my 2016 mock draft. We start things off at number 1 overall, the Los Angeles Rams. I'm sure I'll call them St. Louis at least 50 times in the next year. But the LA Rams have traded up to number 1 and given up a lot of draft capital to do so. If you don't have a franchise quarterback, you don't give up this amount of picks unless you're trying to get one. They drafted Aaron Donald, who's already an all-pro player. That didn't make him a playoff team. They traded up a couple years back for Tavon Austin. That didn't make him a playoff team. They need to get a quarterback if they're even going to have a chance, especially in that division. I have number 1 overall, Jared Goff, quarterback from Cal. Now, it's funny because day 1 of the trade, the consensus was it's Carson Wentz. And then it shifted gradually. I'm not sure. There's got to be some misinformation out there if Wentz was the early talk, unless the Rams changed their mind, which I don't believe they did. If you're trading up to number 1, you know who you're going to take. This regime needs to win, and they want to create some buzz out there in Los Angeles, although I don't think that moving to LA is the reason they want a quarterback this bad. When teams don't have quarterbacks, they usually don't win, and that leads to people getting fired. So they need to get a quarterback. And between Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, you could say that Jared Goff gives them the best chance to win some games here in year 1. And many already have Jared Goff as their number 1 quarterback anyway. So this is no surprise, and you guys are probably annoyed that I spent more than 5 seconds talking about this top pick or the second pick. So Jared Goff at number 1. And number 2, I have Carson Wentz like everybody else does. It's a brand new coaching staff in Philadelphia, and they will have a chance to ease Carson Wentz along if they like. They have Sam Bradford on the roster and Chase Daniel, although Sam Bradford's not too happy out there, and so I'm not sure what the Eagles are going to do with Bradford. Maybe Chase Daniel goes from being a very high-paid backup to being a very low-paid starting quarterback for week 1. I'm not sure when to expect Carson Wentz to play, but I think he's going to be picked at number 2. And now this is where the draft actually begins. I'm sure those two teams will also spend a lot of time on the clock. Just you're going to have your draft food in front of you, and you're going to be done eating by the time the San Diego Chargers are on the clock. So the draft starts probably 20 minutes in, 15-20 minutes. Here are the San Diego Chargers, and now the rumors lately, as I do follow a lot of draft guys and a lot of writers and scouts, a lot of very smart people who do a lot of really good stuff with their content. The talk now has been shifted to Ronnie Stanley, who many have as the number 2 tackle in this class behind Laramie Tunsil. And there's another part of the community that thinks that it could be DeForest Buckner. Regardless, it just hasn't seemed like the San Diego Chargers have put a lot of interest into Laramie Tunsil, at least what is being talked about by the media. Last night was Mike Mayock's mock draft, and I always love watching his mock draft and what he thinks, and he had Ronnie Stanley going number 3. Now, I don't want to just change my mock draft based on what guys like Mayock are doing, so I'm not going to adjust my pick here. I did have DeForest Buckner for a while, but I decided to go away from that. and I have put Laramie Tunsil at number 3, and we'll see if it happens. Now, why would the talk be that Stanley, or the Chargers like Stanley, if they have nothing to really gain from a smokescreen? They are basically the top pick in the draft. They are essentially on the clock, so what would be the reasoning here? And the only thing I can think of is that they would love to trade down. They have some holes on that roster. They would love to get as many picks as possible, and maybe they like Stanley. Maybe they do like DeForest Buckner, but maybe they also like Laramie Tunsil. And the thing is, if you like Stanley and Buckner, you can get them a little bit lower, a couple picks down. Maybe that was put out there just so they can maybe get some trade offers and see what was out there, because maybe they're thinking Tunsil at 3, or we can trade down and still get a guy like Ronnie Stanley or DeForest Buckner. I don't know what their mindset is, but that is like the best way I can justify putting Laramie Tunsil here despite the reports. So maybe somebody wants to trade up here for Jalen Ramsey, and the Chargers can trade down a few spots, and maybe they end up with a Ronnie Stanley. I'm not sure. I would love to see the Chargers trade down, or just take Jalen Ramsey, which is the pick that I would have probably put here if it weren't for, like, the talk shifting away from Ramsey at number 3. But let's move on. I have Goff, Wentz, Tunsil, and now number 4, the Dallas Cowboys. And this is a very interesting selection here. Or a very interesting spot, I mean. The guy is interesting too, he's a really good player. But they have need at pass rusher, especially the first 4 games with Randy Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence suspended. They could still use another pass rusher when those guys are back in the game. They could use a running back, Ezekiel Elliott. Defensive back, Jalen Ramsey. What do you do here for the Dallas Cowboys? I have them selecting Jalen Ramsey, cornerback from Florida State. He could also play safety, of course. I think he could do very well at either spot, but I would first like to see him play some cornerback, especially because the Cowboys have had some instability over there in recent years. Safety, though, wouldn't hurt either. Ramsey's a very great athlete, elite speed, height, just an awesome prospect, and I don't care about the 3 interceptions. If the Cowboys select him here, I predict he catches more than 3 interceptions in his rookie year. Especially playing against Eli Manning a couple times. You got a couple chances there. Maybe you play against Carson Wentz twice in his rookie year. Who knows? But I think the Cowboys select Jalen Ramsey here over Ezekiel Elliott. It would be great to see Zeke behind that offensive line, a healthy Tony Romo, and Dez Bryant out wide at receiver. But since DeMarco Murray's great year in 2014, the Cowboys haven't seemed to prioritize running back that much. They let DeMarco Murray go. He got a big contract from Philadelphia. I don't really fault them for not wanting to pay DeMarco that much. Then they replaced him with Darren McFadden last year, a very cheap option. And then this past offseason, they signed Alfred Morris. They could have had a chance to maybe get in on the Lamar Miller sweepstakes. They don't have a ton of cap room. They could have still pulled it off. But I just don't think the Cowboys have valued running back that much in recent years, and for them to take Elliott would kind of be a change of that mindset. Maybe it's just they don't want to pay that much money, and of course the top 4 pick, that's going to have a decent rookie contract, but it's still a rookie contract, and it's not like a DeMarco Murray deal. So maybe I'm wrong and they do value a running back, but they'd rather spend a high pick than a big contract. So we'll see what they do. This is a very interesting spot if both Ramsey and Elliott are on the board. Now, number 5, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I have them selecting Joey Bosa, defensive end from Ohio State. They need a pass rusher, and they showed interest in Olivier Vernon when he was available. Now, they have Dante Fowler coming back from injury, but that did not stop them from having interest in Vernon. And they could still use another pass rusher regardless. I'm sure they're still excited about Dante Fowler. They were excited enough to take him very early last season. But this could also be an area where the Jaguars surprise us with a pick, or they eventually just trade down, which I don't think a trade down is a bad idea if Jalen Ramsey is off the board. But I have them selecting Joey Bosa just to help out their pass rush a bit, although I do wonder how much of their valuable assets they can possibly put in this defensive line. Top 5 picks to Fowler and Bosa, big contracts to Jared Odrick and Malik Jackson. Derek Marks is getting paid a good bit, but it's not hurting them too badly. And regardless if it's not Bosa, I think he goes around this area anyway. So I got to play the points game here on NFL.com, predict the pick. And sometimes if I'm even not that confident in the player to the team, but the player in the spot, I will still put the player there, and you'll see that down the list a little bit. Let's move on now. Number 6, the Baltimore Ravens, who are not used to picking this high. Maybe Ozzie just trades down so he's more comfortable and down near his usual range. Or he stays up here and catches a falling star. Maybe it's Laramie Tunsil if Stanley does go higher, which would be pretty unfair. I have debated this pick a little bit, but I have settled on Ronnie Stanley as the pick to Baltimore. I wanted to put DeForest Buckner here and go back to defense in 2016 for the Ravens, but I've given them Ronnie Stanley. They could wait and take a later tackle prospect, maybe trade up to the bottom of the first round, or wait till top of the second where they're slotted the pick. But they may not have a chance because I don't expect the Ravens to be this bad again. They won't likely have a chance to get a tackle prospect like Ronnie Stanley, and if they want to get younger and talented on the offensive line, right here is the spot to either take Tunsil or Stanley. So I have them taking Ronnie Stanley, and then DeForest Buckner at number 7 to the San Francisco 49ers. This is one of those picks where I see they could use a player like him, and I've also seen a lot of reports suggesting that they like Buckner quite a bit. Regardless, I do think Buckner goes somewhere in this range, so I'm going to put him here at 7, and I think that San Francisco could take him if he is there and the tackles are not. Now, number 8, and I think this does shake up things a little bit. It's not really going out on a huge limb, but I think this is the spot where Ezekiel Elliott is selected. Maybe it's not the Cleveland Browns. I think they want to trade down, and if they want to trade down, the guy to trade up for here at 8 is Ezekiel Elliott. So I'm putting Elliott here. Now, what if the Browns stay here and take Ezekiel Elliott? I wouldn't hate it. I don't think I'd love it, but I certainly would not hate it. It is a multi-year rebuilding project going there, led by new head coach Hugh Jackson, and many think he is the guy to steer the ship in the right direction. Now, they have a lot of needs. The best way to go about that is to get a lot of picks. If Elliott makes it to 8, I don't think they'll have trouble finding a trade partner, specifically Miami at 13. So let's move on from 8. We're almost out of the top 10. It is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the clock. Tampa Bay has a big need at corner, and they're in range here to take one of the top cornerback prospects available. Now, lately, the popular pick has been Leonard Floyd, the pass rusher from Georgia. And many say he could play in an Anthony Barr-style role. They already have Quan Alexander, Levante David, so Floyd could be another outside backer, and he could pass rush in the nickel, and they could use a pass rusher, so it could definitely be like a 2-for-1 help there if you play him in the base. But I have them going corner because I just think the need is so great that I wouldn't wait too long. And maybe second round you can still make something happen, but I'm putting Vernon Hargreaves here at number 9, which is a very common pick here. I know it's not much of a surprise. If they do want a cornerback, I wouldn't be surprised if they would rather have a taller, faster cornerback. Maybe they want a William Jackson or Eli Apple. In that case, a trade down could be very possible. But I have them taking Hargreaves here, the in-state product, just heading on over to Tampa. And that takes us to number 10, the New York Giants, who spent a top 10 selection on a tackle last year in Eric Flowers. So could they do that again? They've put so many of their free agent resources, big money, into defense. Janoris Jenkins, Olivier Vernon, that was a monster contract, as well as Damon Harrison. So will they spend 3 big contracts and their first pick on defense? I would like to see them take a linebacker. They just don't. I'm not sure why. So I'm not going to give them a linebacker this year. I'm going to give them another offensive tackle, and I'm giving them Jack Conklin here at 10. I can see them continue to try Eric Flowers at left tackle and put Jack Conklin on the right side, but I just think that Conklin's value is probably in this spot. The Giants need a tackle, and this is probably at least the range where Conklin ends up going. Next up now, number 11, the Chicago Bears, hosting, well, not the Bears aren't hosting, but their city is, hosting the draft for the second year in a row, and they have done a really good job trying to rebuild this defense. Danny Trevathan was a great move, and I think they had a pretty good value for his contract. They already picked up Pernell McPhee a year ago. They drafted Adrian Amos last year. A couple years back, they selected Kyle Fuller, and I was a big fan of both Amos and Kyle Fuller. I have them going defense once again, although I think this could be another surprising pick if they decide to put another resource into their offense. But I have the Bears selecting Leonard Floyd, giving them another pass rusher, this one opposite Pernell McPhee. And I think Floyd kind of goes in this range. He's getting a lot of hype right now, perhaps even top 10 hype, so I can't let him fall too far. And I think there's a fit here at a need for Chicago. Next up, number 12, the New Orleans Saints, and they need some defense. And there's talk they could be interested in a quarterback in this draft, and I thought about Paxton Lynch. But I just have to put a defender here, another one that's getting top 10 hype. I know like 20 guys get top 10 hype, and there are only 10 that can go here, so someone has to fall out a little bit, and I have Sheldon Rankins as the pick to New Orleans. He could be a very disruptive defensive lineman for them, and they need some help on that defense, and I expect their first pick to be a defender. Now, it could also be Myles Jack. I've seen that rumor as of late. How far does Jack fall? That's something nobody can really be sure about, because we don't know medical. We don't know what teams think about Jack's knee. So where do you put him? I don't have him here quite yet. I have Rankins going to New Orleans, or maybe he goes a little bit higher and I still get some points for it. Next up, the Miami Dolphins, who would surely love to trade up and select Ezekiel Elliott, I think at least. So if they stay here at 13, or if I just have to find a player that goes in this area, I'm going to go with another pass rusher in Shaq Lawson. Now, I liked Mayock's reasoning for why they'd take Shaq Lawson, and I tried every reason to find somebody else to put here. I couldn't justify a receiver. They took Devontae Parker last year, and they're not exactly hurting there. Elliott makes sense, but they have to likely trade up for him. Lawson does make sense. There aren't a lot of highly touted pass rushers, edge rushers. So Shaq Lawson makes sense here in this range. He makes sense for Miami because Cameron Wake and Mario Williams are both over 30. And even if he's not the selection, I don't want to risk dropping him down too far. I got to get my points here, guys. Next up, the Oakland Raiders at number 14. And I swear, I'm not just copying Mayock on this one. I was doing mock draft like all yesterday. I wanted to make this video yesterday. But I just kept changing things in the top 10, and there's a domino effect. Once I started putting Jack outside the top 10, I had trouble finding him a spot. I ended up here with Oakland because I think they did a good job addressing some areas of concern in free agency. They signed Kelechi Osemele to a big deal. They picked up Bruce Irvin, Sean Smith, Reggie Nelson. I believe the Raiders could afford to take a chance here in the first round and select Myles Jack. And of course, you could have an amazing branding opportunity here. You got Jack and Mac. That could be a t-shirt in like 2 days. Come on. Myles Jack here would be scary if he can stay healthy and on the field. I would love to see Jack continue to fall, maybe down to 23 to my favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings. But for the case of my mock draft, I have him going toward the middle of the first round, here to the Oakland Raiders. Now on the clock, we have the Tennessee Titans, the former owners of the number 1 overall pick. All the way down here at 15, they could still address offensive line issues. You have to protect Marcus Mariota. They could probably like to trade up and take a tackle they prefer, or they could stay down here at 15. Regardless, I think this player can go in this range. So I have Taylor Decker going to the Tennessee Titans. On many boards, Decker is the 4th best tackle, and I already have 3 off the board. And I think Tennessee's first pick has to be a tackle because they need to protect their franchise quarterback, Marcus Mariota. Taylor Decker is kind of just the next one in line here, and I think that even if it's not like Decker to the Titans here, I think he goes in this range in the middle of the first round. The offensive linemen usually seem to go heavy in the first round. That takes us now to number 16, and this does shake things up a bit. I think this is the range for this player, maybe not to this team, although I can see this team taking this player. I have the Lions selecting Josh Doctson, wide receiver from TCU. I believe if there is a player to trade up for in this spot, it could end up being Josh Doctson, or maybe a little bit lower. But I have Doctson here because the Lions could surprise us. Megatron retired, and you don't replace Megatron with just one guy. Marvin Jones is a good receiver, but I really wouldn't be thinking they would spend that much money on a receiver and their top first-round pick. So maybe this doesn't make any sense at all for Detroit, but I could see them doing it, and I could also see this being the range for Doxson or a defensive lineman here to Detroit if they just stand pat. But regardless, I have Doxson going here. Yell about it in the comments section. Now on the clock, number 17, the Atlanta Falcons. I have a boring pick here. Darren Lee, linebacker from Ohio State. Everybody else has this pick. I would not be surprised if it's also Reggie Ragland. It depends what they value more. Do they want a thumper in the middle, or do they want the athlete on the outside in Darren Lee? And I think that a lot of people like to make the ties between Bruce Irvin and what Dan Quinn did with him up in Seattle. So Darren Lee here makes sense. If Darren Lee doesn't go to the Falcons, though, I don't really see where he's going to go. And maybe that's because no one else talks about Darren Lee to another team because he never makes it past Atlanta in these mock drafts. But I have Darren Lee going here like many others. Number 18, the Indianapolis Colts. And they do need to do a better job of protecting Andrew Luck. So, I have them selecting the top center on most boards, Ryan Kelly. I think Kelly goes in this range for a team wanting a high-quality center, and I have him going here to Indianapolis. So let's get on to number 19 now, the Buffalo Bills, and this could be another tough one to gauge. Rex Ryan is not used to having underwhelming defense, which is exactly what they had last year. If you look at their stats from last year in terms of yards allowed and points, they were very average. So I can see this being a defender, and it's just which one and which area. Because I have the Bills selecting Reggie Ragland, the linebacker out of Alabama. I think they could use this big run stuffer in the middle, and maybe they don't want to take a linebacker here and they want a defensive lineman. Surely there are a lot of very good defensive linemen in this draft. It's a very deep draft. And so do you like the combo of a first-round lineman and a linebacker later, or Ragland now and a lineman later? I'm putting Ragland here because I think that he goes somewhere in this first round, and many mocks have him falling to Green Bay. But I think because Ragland is one of the only players this highly touted with a mold like his, an inside linebacker, I think maybe he can go a little bit earlier to a coach like Rex Ryan. That takes us to Rex Ryan's old team, the New York Jets. Now, what's this whole Ryan Fitzpatrick saga? How is it going to end? I have a feeling they're still going to end up with Fitzpatrick somehow. I mean, he was there last year. Why would Fitz want to go somewhere else? I'm sure he's just trying to make as much money as possible, and eventually after this draft, I think he'll settle back with the Jets. But I can still see him looking for a true quarterback of the future, and they haven't shown much trust in the guys on the roster, Bryce Petty, Geno Smith. So I have them taking Paxton Lynch here. I don't know where Paxton Lynch could go in this draft. I think it's in the first round. Teams love that fifth-year option, and they're not afraid to trade up into the first round to get a quarterback if they like him. So I have no idea where Lynch could go in this first round. It could be anywhere from the top 10 all the way down to 31. But I have him going here at 20 to the Jets. Next up at 21, the Washington Redskins. I have them going defense here, helping out their run defense in Jarran Reed from Alabama. Now, there are a lot of defensive linemen highly touted in this class, and it's really just about which one do you prefer, which one best fits your scheme. I'm not sure what these teams are thinking, but I think Jarran Reed goes in the first round, and I have him going here. They lost Terrence Knighton this past offseason, and they could use some help shoring up the run defense. One thing that's interesting, by the way, with this Washington defense, if you look at their stats, their yards and their points allowed, they were 28th in defense, 25th against the pass, 26th against the run, but still 17th in points allowed. Not bad. Next up, we hit wide receiver row here. The Texans, Vikings, and Bengals all surely want to take a wide receiver. Maybe one of them likes one enough to trade up for whoever they like the most. Could it be Josh Doxson? Could it be LaQuon Treadwell? Corey Coleman as well. There are other receivers garnering first-round hype. So what do the Texans do at number 22 overall? I have them selecting wide receiver Will Fuller from Notre Dame. Now, I could very well see it here being Corey Coleman. Both offer some deep threat ability, yards after the catch. I prefer Corey Coleman, but I have them going with Will Fuller. He is faster, he is a little bit taller, and if they want a true deep threat, this is the guy to go for. Will Fuller can stretch the defense, but he drops a lot of passes, and everyone loves making that link between him and Ted Ginn, or Troy Williamson if you're a Vikings fan. Will Fuller is exciting to watch and he makes a lot of incredible plays, but the drops are concerning and you wonder what else does he offer beyond the deep threat ability. So, I have Fuller going here, but I have no idea what's going to happen. Next up, we have my favorite team here, the Minnesota Vikings, and I haven't nailed one of their picks in a while. It's been a long time since Matt Khalil, and I wanted them to take Harrison Smith with their next selection, and they ended up doing it. But then, I have struck out ever since. Can I get the Vikings right this year? At number 23, I have the Minnesota Vikings selecting LaQuon Treadwell, the receiver out of Ole Miss. I do like Treadwell quite a bit. I like Josh Doctson as well. I like Corey Coleman. I like Will Fuller, but not in this spot, and certainly not to Minnesota. I don't think his abilities would be best fit for Teddy Bridgewater's strengths. And obviously the Mike Wallace stuff didn't work out. Try something else this year. I don't care if it's Coleman, Doctson, Treadwell. I would love either of those guys. In order, I would prefer Treadwell, then Josh Doctson, then Corey Coleman. I just like Treadwell's physicality. He makes the tough catches. He's a tough run blocker. He's only 20 years old. He's tough to tackle. I like Treadwell's game quite a bit. Last year was his first off of injury. I like to see what he could do in a Viking uniform in the brand new stadium with Teddy Bridgewater in 2016. That takes us to 24 here on wide receiver row, and we have Corey Coleman going to the Cincinnati Bengals. They could be trading up for Josh Doctson. They might prefer somebody else. I have them selecting Corey Coleman as an awesome complement to A.J. Green. They lost Sanu and they lost Marvin Jones, so a receiver is an obvious spot for them to attack here in the early rounds. Coleman is very talented, and a lot of teams might view him as the top receiver, and if he's not the top receiver taken, they might jump all over him if he falls far enough. So maybe Coleman is somebody a team trades up for, and I would not at all be surprised about that. But here I have him falling to number 24 and making that offense very interesting in Cincinnati. Up next at number 25, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I can see them going toward trying to rebuild this defense further. They could use a defensive back, and there are some good corners in this class, and I have them falling in this mock draft. So it depends on what your flavor is. What do you prefer? And here in this spot, there are a couple taller, faster guys along with Mackenzie Alexander, but I know the NFL likes their measurables. They like the tall guy who can run fast. And I have the Steelers selecting William Jackson III at number 25. It could be Eli Apple, it could be Mackenzie Alexander, or it could be someone completely different. It could be a defensive lineman. But I've only had 2 corners go off the board, so there could be some good value here. They could also maybe pick up a safety, but I have them going corner. It's a pretty good safety class as well. So William Jackson III is my pick here. And number 26, the Seattle Seahawks. They need some offensive line help, but they're a very tough team to predict. They have a second-round pick and 2/3. So 4 picks in the top 97, that is a good set of picks to attack the offensive line. But will they do it in the first round? There is some value down here late, and I have the Seahawks passing on an offensive lineman in the first round and selecting Robert Nkemdiche out of Ole Miss. He is expected to drop a pretty good way because of character concerns, but how far does he fall? I like the idea Mayock had of Nkemdiche to Buffalo, but I had them going Ragland. So Nkemdiche here to the Seahawks could be a fit for them, but at some point they do need to get more aggressive about fixing their offensive line. Number 27, the Green Bay Packers. I do think they would love it if Reggie Ragland fell to this point, but I don't have him available. So now we go to the defensive line. B.J. Raji retired, and there are a variety of players you could put into this spot. Andrew Billings, Kenny Clark, other defensive linemen as well. There are a lot of options here, and it's tough to sort out through it, so I have a guy going that I think could find his way here late in the first round. I have them selecting Andrew Billings, nose tackle from Baylor. If Billings doesn't go here, he might go to some other team that wants him down in this range. But with all these defensive linemen, some very good ones are going to make it into the second round and very later. It's a deep defensive line class. But I do think Green Bay's first pick is about run defense. Next, at number 28, I have the Kansas City Chiefs selecting Noah Spence. They could use another rush linebacker. Justin Houston is coming off of injury. Tamba Hali is getting up there in age. Dee Ford isn't panning out the way they had hoped. And Spence offers good value here if the Chiefs still have him on their board. He is from Eastern Kentucky. Prior it was Ohio State. And we'll see if someone takes a chance on him late in the first round. He has a lot of ability. And the Chiefs and Andy Reid could be the team that makes that decision. Now, as these mock drafts go on, I get less and less confident as we go. And I'm not really confident about this number 29 selection. I like this range for this player. I would love to see him as a Viking. But if he becomes a Cardinal, it could be a lot of fun. At number 29, I have the Arizona Cardinals selecting Carl Joseph, safety out of West Virginia. If they pick up Carl Joseph, they have a guy who can play in the box. He can play free safety. And they already have playmakers with Patrick Peterson. They have Tyrann Mathieu. They pick up the pass rusher in Chandler Jones. They also have Deon Buchanan, but Carl Joseph gives them the flexibility to keep doing what they want to do with Mathieu at nickel corner, and they can move Joseph around. That would just be a nightmare to go up against. I'd love to see Carl Joseph in Arizona or in Minnesota. I love him next to Harrison Smith as well. Now to number 30, the Carolina Panthers. I think they could be interested in one of the top receivers, but nobody falls to this point. So if they stand pat at 30, it could be an offensive lineman. Many people have an edge rusher here, and I do as well, in defensive end, Kevin Dodd from Clemson. Now, I'm not sure Panther fans like this pick a whole lot. He is a guy you could look to have replace Charles Johnson at some point. But I'm just not sure what else the Panthers would do here. Could they take a corner if a good one falls? They very well might. Just because they didn't want to give Josh Norman a huge contract doesn't mean they don't value cornerback. But I'm just not sure what to expect from them in this spot. I think Kevin Dodd makes some sense, and I have him going to Carolina. And that takes us to the final pick. Number 31, the defending Super Bowl champions, the Denver Broncos. Now, they could use a quarterback, but do they want to take one here at 31? They would get a fifth-year option. That'd be nice. Maybe they still end up with Colin Kaepernick. Maybe they get Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm not sure what they're going to do at quarterback. I have them just taking a highly rated prospect. I had no guards going in this first round until now. I have them taking Cody Whitehair from Kansas State. I don't doubt that the Denver Broncos would like to trade down here, but you have to find a trade partner. And who would someone want to trade up for? Maybe a quarterback. I already had Paxton Lynch off the board. Would a team want to trade up to the first round to take either Connor Cook or a Christian Hackenberg? I'm just going to guess no. I think maybe only 3 quarterbacks go on in the first round, but I could be very wrong. Teams need their quarterbacks, and they'll do crazy things to get them. And I just have Cody Whitehair going here. It fits a need. It's a highly rated player, and why not? Mock draft's over, and I can finally put this to rest. So that is it, guys. That is my first round mock draft for 2016. And don't forget to join my NFL.com Predict the Pick group and post your mock draft in there, and we'll see who ends up with the most accurate. I highly doubt it will be me, but I like making these mock drafts. It's a fun way to help pass time until the draft actually hits, and it's just nice to create conversation and talk about these prospects and whatnot. So let me know what you thought down below in the comments section. You probably didn't like it, because no one likes mock drafts, but they still seek them out. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. I cannot wait for the first round tonight and see where these players finally end up going. Have a great day, guys. I will see you later.